All right, you're going to be sick of watching videos probably by the end of today, but consider it like a throwback to remote learning. So, those of you that are new that haven't had me for remote learning, this is what we did a lot of in the fall. So, this is what we are doing for just the day while I get better and am able to spend some time with Russell as well. All right, so here we go, social studies. Now, we have been learning about the North and the South, and the reason that we had the Civil War was because of an issue called slavery. And you guys should know a lot more about that now. I want you to remember that I handed out a slave versus free state map that I also had you taking notes on the back of. We were coloring states that were blue and red, and I told you to put it in your unfinished work folder. I want you to go ahead and pause the video and grab that map because we're going to be having you take some notes on that. All right, sorry, fifth graders, completely lost my train of thought here because Russell asked me for something. Anyway, I hope you have your map now and you have paused the video to grab it so that we can do some 2-column notes at the end here on a couple of different things from the video. So we're going to first watch a video about the Compromise of 1850. When we are done with the Compromise of 1850, I will help you start reading this article that is going to be on Google Classroom for you to access. And then you will have the job of completing these 5 questions when you are finished. So first things first, let's watch this video and take some notes about the Compromise of 1850. First, a compromise is where 2 parties have to come to an agreement. So, for example, compromise means that everyone's giving up something in order for both sides to be happy. So you make compromises all the time, I'm sure, with your parents. You compromise, I'll do this for you, mom and dad, if you do this for me. So a compromise is like both people that are disagreeing are giving up something, giving up a little bit of their power. So this happened in the year of 1850, and we're going to learn a little bit about what it is and why it was important.
The Compromise of 1850 was an attempt to resolve sharp differences in the U.S. over the slavery issue, differences that were threatening to split the country in two. Southerners insisted that slavery be legal in the territory won during the recent Mexican-American War.
So remember when I first showed you the map and there was that whole area that I said used to be Mexico? Well, fast forward a couple years and we have now won that war, the Mexican-American War, and now all this new territory is part of the United States. And people are wondering, should slaves be allowed in these new states? And Southerners and Northerners are getting pretty fired up about it because the South thinks that there should be slavery in the new territories, and the North says nope. The North thinks that those new states should be free states.
Northerners wanted that territory free of slavery.
That was one of the big issues in the Compromise of 1850. New territory had been acquired from Mexico during the Mexican War. There was California, which actually had formed a constitution and wanted to be admitted to the Union as a free state. There were those other territories, New Mexico, Utah, Arizona. What's going to be the status of slavery there?
Southerners feared that if slavery were banned in the new territories, the Union might tip in favor of abolition and destroy their economy. Southern states began to threaten secession. To try to keep the country together, 3 veteran politicians, Whig Senators Henry Clay and Daniel Webster, and Democratic Senator John Calhoun, eventually forged a compromise. They proposed a series of laws designed to placate both sides. The final deal offered something to both sides, but only after months of debate so heated.
So this is the compromise part. So listen up to what they decided to agree on to solve this problem.
One angry senator actually pulled a gun on the Senate floor.
California is admitted as a free state, and for the rest of that Mexican territory, popular sovereignty is implemented. That is, the people in those territories will basically decide whether they want slavery or not. That's, in other words, putting the question off to the future.
Some of these new laws also please Southern slave owners.
There's a new fugitive slave law, much tougher than in the past, to try to use the power of the federal government to capture and return slaves who managed to make it to the North.
We talked about this fugitive slave law last week, where they could go to the North and bring their slaves that had run away back to the South. And that was pretty controversial, and a lot of the Northerners did not like it.
It therefore means that states like Massachusetts, states like Pennsylvania, states like, to some extent, Connecticut and a few others, that had actually begun to develop a fairly healthy abolitionist tradition, were now being forced by the government to implicate themselves in the process of actually capturing human beings and returning them. It meant that their courts would actually be involved, their citizens would be involved, the sheriff would be involved.
The government clearly aligned itself with the slaveholders in this regard, and it demonstrated that slavery was centrally part of American society and politics. It's not just a sectional institution, it has a very national basis.
Politicians hailed the Compromise of 1850 as a great triumph of statesmanship, one that would settle tensions over slavery once and for all. But the Compromise only postponed conflict for a few years. By 1856, the battle over another new territory, Nebraska, would set the country on the path to war.
So the Compromise of 1850 was an attempt to make both the North and the South happy. However, it did not work, as you can see, because we ended up still having the Civil War over slavery. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to pause the video. All right, we're going to go over to this whiteboard. Now in the back, you should already have a 2-column note structure created. If not, you're going to want to create one. And it is really, really hard, guys, for me to draw on the computer. So I just want to give you that heads up right now. So what we're going to do is we are going to write our star. So please do not judge my messy handwriting, because it's not easy. Oh man, it's so hard, guys. Okay, Compromise of 1850 is what you are going to write with on your 2-column notes. Okay. Now, important to remember about the Compromise of 1850, it was made by a man called Henry Clay. So the reason it's important is because he made most of these laws. And I'm really sorry, Russell has this super fun duck toy that quacks. So if you hear a bunch of quacking in this video, just know that's where that's coming from. Okay, so Henry Clay was the person who made a bunch of these compromises. Remember, a compromise is where they try to come to an agreement. And they were fighting about whether this new territory could have slaves or not. And the Compromise of 1850 said, this is going to be my dot, so you can go ahead and pause as much as you need to, states specifically new states, ones that we just won in the Mexican-American War, like California, could vote on whether or not they wanted to have slaves. And this idea was called popular sovereignty because you had to decide and vote together as a state and who a majority ruled. And it also admitted California as a free state. So California, just going to write CA, was a free state. So when the 49ers moved there, it was all free. And that made the South upset because they wanted more slave states. All right, lovely notes. Here we go. Thank goodness that's the last note you're going to have to take today. All right. I'm going to have you write down. And yeah, so that was the attempt of trying to keep the states happy. So we've got Henry Clay. States could vote on whether or not they wanted to have slaves, and then California was admitted to the country as a free state. So those were just a bunch of laws passed by Congress saying whether slavery could be in the new part of the United States. All right, so now we're going to read a little bit about slavery in the United States. You also have this on Classroom. I'm going to read it along with you, and then I would like you to reread it by yourself as well. So it says, in the early 1800s, slavery was a constant source of tension between northern and southern states. That means they were fighting about it a lot. Most Northerners felt slavery was a moral injustice, so they thought it was morally wrong to own another human being. While Southerners feared the abolition means to get rid of, slavery would destroy the economy in their region. They needed the slaves to do their work. Knowing the tension was building around this matter, Congress made several efforts to help the two sides compromise. In 1819, there were 22 states. So there's 50 states in our country today, so back then there was only 22. It says half the states were slave states and half the states were free states. That year, Missouri requested for its admission as a state desiring to be a slave state. The request upset the balance of power as it would have created more slave states than free states. In an effort to calm tensions, Congress passed the Missouri Compromise. As part of the compromise, Missouri was admitted as a slave state, but Maine was admitted as a free state. So each side got what they wanted because they got one slave state and one free state. It drew an invisible line across Western territories, said any territory south of the line that became a state would be a slave state, and any territory north would be a free state. So that was their kind of solution at the time. So he just drew like this line through the country, and they were like, if you're below here, you're slaves. If you're above here, you're free. And this was called the Mason-Dixon line. It says, wow. The Missouri Compromise kept slave and free states balance. It faced criticism from both sides. Now let me go back here to my thing. There we go. The South disliked Congress making laws about slavery. The North disliked the Missouri Compromise for expanding slavery into new states. They wanted slavery to stop. They didn't think it should be at the new states. In 1850, California was admitted as a state. Once again, the balance between slave and free states became an issue. Congress passed the Compromise of 1850, which is what we just learned about. As part of the Compromise, California would be admitted as a free state. The issue of slavery was not settled in the territories of Utah or New Mexico. Rather, it was decided the citizens of those new territories could vote when they requested to become states. Slavery would continue to be permitted in Washington, D.C., but the capital city could no longer participate in the slave trade. Most controversial part of the compromise was the fugitive slave law. Northerners would be required to return runaway slaves to the South. So we just talked about all of that. Once again, the compromise didn't really help. It did little to calm tensions between North and South. Northerners did not like the fugitive slave law as they felt it was forcing them to participate in something they thought was wrong. Southerners felt the North was favored in the compromise. In 1854, the Missouri Compromise replaced with the Kansas-Nebraska Act. The Missouri Compromise had established geographical lines to show which states would be slave and which one would be free. The Kansas-Nebraska Act removed this line. So that line I was talking about where the southern ones would be slave and the northern would be free, they took that away. Under the Missouri Compromise, both Kansas and Nebraska should have been free. Rather than admit two free states, which would have upset Southerners, Congress decided citizens of the states could vote again. This became the standards of all territories that sought statehood. The Kansas-Nebraska Act made tensions much worse. Pro-slavery, that means they were for slavery, and anti, which means against, began quickly moving to Kansas, hoping to impact the outcome of the vote, to make the state a slave state or a free state. Soon, violence erupted between the opposing groups. The violence became known as Bloody Kansas, and federal troops had to be sent in to stop it. So they were fighting so much about voting that they were actually killing each other over it, whether or not Kansas should be a free or a slave state. Congress made several attempts to calm tensions over slavery. For 34 years, the Missouri Compromise put a Band-Aid over the problem to keep a major conflict from erupting. But the Kansas-Nebraska Act removed that Band-Aid, and it was a turning point that would lead to the Civil War. So these states arguing about whether they were going to allow slaves or not is basically what kind of created this issue that led to us going to the Civil War. Now, I just read that to you. Sorry, fifth graders, I'm tired. After watching this video, you are now going to go onto Google Classroom and you are going to click on the assignment Slavery in the United States. Open it up. You can click present mode so that you can see the questions better. And you are going to answer these. Notice their text box. I would like you to answer in a complete sentence with a capital letter and a period. We will go over these answers when I come back tomorrow. However, I really would like you to try on your own to get as many of them done as possible. If you finish early, you may read to self or listen to reading, but please have your guest teacher check your answers first. This is a longer video, so now that you're finished, if you comment on the assignment after you turn it in with the word candy, I will give you some candy tomorrow because you listened all the way to the end. All right. Good job for listening. Thanks for learning with me, and good luck answering those questions.